So tonight we are discussing the battle of the brands. And when I say that, what I mean by that is the business brand versus the personal professional brand. So basically, in light of the current climate, there's a few figureheads that are coming together and leading the way and guiding some other people in these times of crisis. And I've invited a few of them along tonight to share their opinions and discussions on this particular area. We've got Nicholas Schuster from the Ultimate Physio, business coach extraordinaire, dealing with a lot of private businesses and business owners. It's got Stephen Escarf, who's a final year osteo student from VU, also an intern and runs his own successful podcast already, building his own personal brand as we speak. Lisa Cornell, bounce back physio and osteo, one of the two double threats we have in this here today, also a business owner. Dave Renfrew, performance physiotherapy and from the Pain Weapon education platform. Paul Herman, who's going to be joining us soon. I'll have to jump out and try and grab him in a second when he's in the waiting holding bay. Osteo, EP, personal business owner. Stay tuned, sportsmed. Mick Risk, iMove You Education and Clinic Mastery mentor. Stephen King, another double threat, physio, osteo, business owner, strength by numbers, Matt, Accent, podcast, you name it. Stephen King's got it. Luke Nelson with the big smiles, Sports Car Australia, Sports Medicine Australia, Health and High Performance, and I've got you there as an influencer as well because you represent yourself very, very well. Michael O'J, Fonny Osteo student at VU, intern and a huge contributor to a family business. We welcome Anthony Nicholas, CEO of Osteopathy Australia, and apologies from Brendan Mewett, EP, and the Knowledge Exchange, who had to jump out at the last minute. So why are we all here tonight? Uncertain times brings forward a lot of changes, and we're seeing a catalyst for change amongst a few things, in particular being opportunity, proactivity, and a growth mindset. We're not really going to cover some other people dealing with things very, very differently at the moment, but what those three things are giving us is the momentum for change, and particularly that online presence is becoming more important than ever. Social media means front of mind, it means being memorable, and more than anything right now, people want to feel connected. They're in isolation, they're in their homes, their businesses might be in isolation, they might have shut down. Welcome Paul Herman to the group. And practitioners, for the most part, who are healers, and part of their higher purpose is creating change and meaningful change in our patients' lives. We want to feel useful, significant, and helpful. And when you can't do that, when you're sitting at home, when your hours are being cut, or when your workplace has totally changed its environment, you turn to things that are front of mind, and social media is certainly one of them. We are seeing a surge of new personal professional accounts on social media, whether that be Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. We're getting onto TikTok as well. I'm kind of navigating my way around that a little bit as well. But there is certainly an influx of personal social media pages from health professionals. These professionals are delivering new content, home exercises, education, advice, and fundamentally their intentions are good, and everybody is trying to scramble to make some sort of contribution at the moment. So I guess the question is can this be a conflict? And I think when you do have staff on JobKeeper or who are intending on being engaged by JobKeeper, you've got probably not as many hours at work, but you also got a lot of time on your hands at home. So, the questions that we ask and that I'm going to be putting to the panel is, can a practitioner legally promote their own personal professional brand when they're contracted to another business? Are these accounts in competition with the business if they're targeting existing or future patients? And when content is developed, whose content is it? And I'm not talking about sole traders or contractors who are separate businesses within their own entity. There's a lot of legalities surrounding this. And one of the things that I want to make really clear is this panel is not about legal advice, nor is anything that we say binding. We don't want to be attached to any of that. It's just an open, honest discussion. And obviously, when it's signed in a contract, the clauses are very, very clear and the legalities are very, very clear. So ultimately, our opinions tonight are pretty irrelevant if you are bound by a signed contract. But many businesses, and there's a lot that I've spoken to over the last couple of days, don't actually have social media clauses. If at all, they probably haven't even necessarily considered some of these things. Communication and expectation is the key here, and I think we're all in agreement that you need to be communicating with your staff what they're doing outside of work hours, who they're representing and what their responsibilities lie. But the question is, who gets to control that? Who gets to control what people are doing outside of work hours on these personal professional accounts? Now, the difference between personal professional account and a personal account is you've got John Doe. But now what we're seeing is John Doe osteopath, John Doe physiotherapist that is actively promoting content surrounding their professional platform, but under a personal brand. So identity is at play here and personal expression is at play, which is why people are very, very protective in this space and people have very strong opinions on it. So why do we need to discuss this? Social media is not going away. And online is the way of the future. So I think that conversations like this, and I think it's a really important one to have early on because it is going to become more and more front of mind, and you are going to have business owners who don't quite know how to address these conversations in the first place. And the other thing that we're seeing, which is why I've got two students in the group here, some have their own personal professional accounts set up on Instagram and Facebook already before they even get a job. Now, this is something I certainly didn't have. I don't know about many of you guys in the group, but it is something that is part of generational change. And just because it wasn't our way doesn't mean that it's wrong. It means that we all need to evolve, and as future leaders and leaders in allied health, we need to be exploring what it means to have that personal expression. And that's why this grey area is in place. Creative expression is really important when people are sharing their identity. It's a platform on social media that they have the ability to show their personality, deliver content that is their own. They communicate with a tribe that is their own. They build connections with others. It's about recognition and validation as well. There's likes, there's loves, there's emojis, there's different ways of engaging that we, haven't actually seen before. It is the window to the world, and it's how they share and how they choose how they want to be seen. So the question is, can businesses actually have a say in that? Legally, yes. When it comes to a business brand, yes. And how they represent that business brand, yes. It's like going to a school. If you go to a private school, if you're still in school uniform, you still represent that school when you leave. And we had all those rules where you can't smoke in school uniform, and I think even some businesses have that now when it comes to staff being in uniform, how they hold themselves. But I think social media is an extension of that. And I think we and individuals need to tread really cautiously depending on who they are representing, and we'll discuss that a little bit later. So, business brands are still using these platforms as well. And when you've got personal professional brands and business brands on the same platform, competition and conflict will start to arise. How we navigate around that is what we're going to have a chat about today. But one thing is very, very clear, is to establish value in any brand, we need at the very least 4 things. We need time, we need intellectual property, an investment, which can either be money or time, and hard work. So when we are time short at the moment, who decides where this value goes and where this IP goes? And particularly when you've got a business owner who is paying somebody to be contributing and lifting a business platform, then that's where some of the lines start to get blurred. Is what content are you doing for the business? What content are you doing outside the business? Who owns what, and where is that content being shared? So ethically, should business owners be able to restrict professional creativity? Should staff respect a business owner's right to protect their brand without conflict? And who do you represent when you're contracted to a business or an organization? There is ethical versus legal opinions here. There's freedom of speech versus rules, and there's people versus policy. So Nick, if I can address you first, obviously you deal with a lot of business owners, so you might be a little bit biased towards that business owner perspective and being a business owner yourself. Surely a business owner has a right to protect their own brand by encouraging promotion of that business, or therefore discouraging self-promotion. And can a business owner expect employees' focus, if they're paying them, to be on the business? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm really interested by this conversation, Jade, for a couple of reasons. So a lot of what I do with business owners is trying to help them and their employees come to agreements about stuff exactly like this. And for this to happen, the employer needs to see the employee's side and vice versa. And, you don't have to be a genius to say that, every situation that works well is going to be a win-win situation in this particular form. It's obviously new. You've got younger people coming through with massive tech skills and they know how to do this. But, in my experience, the clinic owners with the most, in-demand clinicians, those tend to be experienced clinicians who have, a foot traffic following. So they built a following over time, and most of the time they haven't necessarily done that on social media. The skill that the young clinicians have who are more tech savvy, like the guys who already have these accounts, they can start doing this from scratch. So I suppose, my opinion tends to be a balanced one where, I'm sure most of you guys who are listening to this who own, physio, osteopathic, chiropractic clinics, if you've got team members doing this, it's the exception rather than the rule. And the other reality here, Jade, is if people are doing a great job, whether it's on their own profile or on the business profile, there's a high chance that they're seeing those clients in the clinic, which means both people are going to benefit from that.
Yeah. And I guess, it's a very, and not that, I think as business owners, there is this notion that you're going to build people up and they're just going to leave, and potentially we're at risk of having patients leave with them anyway. So, I mean, at what point do business owners get to protect themselves? Half the time why we don't fight that legal battle, if and when it does happen, I'm sure some of us here have been hit before by somebody opening up around the corner and something like that. I mean, if your brand is strong enough, usually things like that don't rattle you. But most of the time we don't follow up on the legalities of that, because the heartache and the emotion that comes from following that up actually outweighs the legal win. I mean, that's my perspective.
Absolutely. Unless you can prove financial loss, restraint of trade clauses aren't worth the paper they're written on, but I'll leave that for Anthony at the end of this. But the reality that I see, Jade, is, unless you have really tight contracts and position descriptions at the start that detail elements of this, like in our contracts and the contracts of the people I advise, this type of stuff's covered in, IP confidentiality clauses. But then again, when you bring emotion and opportunity into it, IP confidentiality clauses go out the window. So I suppose what I try and advise my clients and what I've done with my own team is I think the absolute win-win common ground is when content can be repurposed. So, the reality is unless you're Albert Einstein, we're probably all just creating variants of the same thing and, content that's been created by somebody before. And the win-win for me is, none of my team members have a personal profile. We all post on the business page, but I believe they don't post on our business page and groups and such as often as they would if they had their own personal profile. When I've worked with clinic owners that have team members with their personal profile, if they can both benefit by the cross sharing of the content and the generation of business that creates, I personally see that as the win and what we're trying to achieve. Because I suppose, Jade, if we try and stifle these physios, and, you know, I've found if we try and stifle them, they're going to find a way to do it anyway. When I was in school, my parents didn't want me to drink. I probably drank more because they didn't want me to drink. So, you know, there's an element of psychology about this with respect to you being a boss or an owner and trying to place a lot of rules around your team members. But, you know, in saying that, if someone goes and builds a following of thousands of people, they can go and plug that in anywhere else they want. But you as the owner, you've got to have strategies around that. Like we in our clinic have very little exclusivity of clients. Each client sees a minimum of 3 practitioners. So that client isn't owned by anyone. They have relationships with 3 people. They're not just going to walk out the door when the clinician leaves.
Yeah. And I think, you know, we'll cover that. There's a few questions that I'll cover later in regards to ownership of the content that is being produced when at work, and what platforms is that being shared on. You know, can it be shared on both? Is it shared on one and not the other? Who gets to take it with them? So I guess, Steve, maybe jumping over to you next. You're obviously a final year student. You're in the thick of this right now. You're of that next generation of allied health professionals coming out, and you're a very proactive one from obviously you know, the contact and the time that I've spent with you. You're moving into potentially employment or setting up your own business or something next year. You know, you've got your own podcast. You know, do you have your own personal professional account at the moment, or is it just a personal account right now?
Yeah, hi Jada. Thanks guys for having me. Yeah, no, so I only have my own like personal, let's say, Instagram account, and that's where I share I guess like life things. You know, I got a puppy, and then I also share like, you know, this is how I stretch my hips. So I guess that professional identity is blended in with my personal identity on a page like Instagram. However, somewhere like on Facebook, I would have like my own personal trainer like Facebook page where I'd post like content there, which would be very different to what I post on my personal personal Facebook profile. I guess when I look at other students and people my age, I kind of see that similar trend. Like, I think we're kind of communicated to at university, like being really cautious of like certain words that we use, such as, you know, I don't see any student calling themselves an osteopath if they're not registered as an osteopath. So I can see how some students would put like, you know, student osteopath in their bio in places and try to develop their brand. But I think that's really like a conditioning thing. You know, like we're conditioned to want to start developing our resume and our CV and, you know, this idea of a portfolio. You know, we want to have some sort of social proof. Like if I went to you with a piece of paper like my portfolio, you know, that means one thing. But if I can show you a video of my knowledge and I guess more social proof, and go, hey Jade, I've got 10,000 followers. Like these people all agree with me. Like I would be of value to you. You know, they'll give me the edge when I'm applying for a job, right? Let it be at a private clinic, let it be at a sports club, let it be, you know, an organization, you know, wherever else. So I think it's almost something that's taught to us from when we're young, and especially at university now, like where it's almost like competitive, right? Like my colleagues are now almost my competitors when I'm applying for a job.
So you'd say that the students obviously see this as an opportunity to build a value and show value coming into a clinic rather than even having conflict of interest on the radar at all.
Yeah, well, I agree. Like, I guess when I look at the industry as a whole, not being part of it yet, I kind of see that personal brand being almost more important than the business brand. Like, I guess for me, if I booked into, I don't know, High Street Health and I went to see John Smith, like the first thing I would do is look up John Smith. Who is he? What does he do? What's he about? Right. So I guess like for me as going into a clinic, I want to give the clinic some value. I want to have value myself, have that social proof so that I know that when somebody Googles my name, they know who I am. They know that I am interested in exercise. I know that they know what my biases are. They know how I'm more likely going to treat them or approach that treatment process. But I think, yeah, you're right. Like value, like I think we all need to provide value. Like I can't expect a clinic to give me all these things. Like I need to bring something to the table.
Yeah, good. And it's an interesting mindset because students are only in that current moment. And I think They are mostly, and I think when it shifts across is, I guess, when you go into becoming that graduated professional with the qualification and then continuing the momentum. I guess that's probably where the grey area lies of that content building and that profile building over the business building. So Lisa, I mean, you have currently, sorry, it's not you yet, Dave. All right, I'll continue with you anyway, Lisa. Sorry.
No problems.
So you've actually got a few new graduates at the moment that are, have platforms and some big personal profiles at the moment.
Yeah, we actually do. I was just looking at my phone because I'm not on social media that much, but we have the full range. We have one of our senior practitioners has his own Instagram following with over 250,000 followers. We have a new grad osteopath that's joined us who's a semi-professional / professional, sorry if I got that wrong, rugby union league player who already has a 50,000 followers on her personal page. We also have like a second year out physio that's running his own Instagram page that is a more of an informative page about physio / exercises. So we've got the whole scope with us at the moment, but our biggest thing is that, if you've got the time to build your brand, you're obviously tech savvy enough to be able to do it, then we expect you to be doing the same thing for the business as well. And we haven't actually had any pushback at all. And the content is always quality that they are producing as well. So I kind of sit on the fence of this because, yes, the biggest danger from any business owner is having a young practitioner or even a more experienced practitioner building up his own brand and having everybody follow him or add him as a friend on these platforms. So then if they do leave, then they've got direct connection of where they're gone to. But on the flip side, if they're actually tech savvy and they're actually producing good content, my whole thing is I don't want content reproduced between their platform and our platform. It's more about having original content that we have ownership over it because it's our IP and stuff that they have developed when they've been employed and paid for by us. So separating a little bit of of what they're putting on their two platforms. The two staff that got quite big followings on Instagram actually, they're both very different platforms to what we're doing as an osteopath physio chiro. They're one of them's running, it's called Get Naked Australia. I'm sure we've all heard it, and the other one is actually just a professional sports player, but she's also sharing a lot of wellness-based stuff that we would actually use on our platforms normally. So yeah, our biggest thing is we're okay for them to share content, except the Get Naked Australia stuff, across our platforms, as long as they're doing the same thing to make sure they're developing their own content for us in the scope of what our values are for our business.
And I think that's it. It's about that mutual win-win, really, isn't it? And I think in any circumstance, in any employee, when you're not getting that win-win, then you start to scratch your head anyway. But I think when it comes to that authentic content, are we going to fall into that category where this is what you do on your profile and this is what we do on ours? Is it a mine versus, can this trigger a mine versus yours content type thing?
Well, I guess we haven't actually come across that yet in terms of ours versus them, because they've been willing to share stuff that we like. Their values of who they are as a person and of what they are as a practitioner is very similar to what ours is as well, is in terms of a business. Like, we make sure we have the right team or the right people in our bus. So when they are putting content on ours, it's equivalent to it's what they'd be putting on theirs anyway, but they're just making sure there's content for us versus content for their own personal brand. So I haven't had that issue yet where we've had to really go, well, hang on, why are you keeping your good stuff for you? Because we have a social media calendar and we then ask people to put content on it based on when they're rostered on the system. So it's not like they're not giving us great content because we're actually telling them what we want them to put onto our pages. Does that make sense? Yeah. It's not like they're keeping their good stuff for them and only giving us the dregs. Like, we're actually dictating or kind of suggesting what our flavor or what our kind of what we're trying to focus on with what our messaging is for social media, and then they kind of fall into that branding with us.
And that's where I think, as a business owner, setting expectations is really important, just like any other KPI or any other mission or goal that you're delivering for your staff or your team, if you make it really, really clear and then somebody's not doing that, whether it's on social media or not, it soon comes to play and it soon starts to, highlight itself, somewhere along the way. Dave, you've got a kind of a similar model. You've got a couple of employees that have got personal profiles. How do you deal with that sharing of content and ownership of content?
Yeah, I guess it is a bit tricky, but I've probably I've made my own problem here, because I have the clinic, and then I have my own sort of side project, I guess. So I've even done it myself, and I'm the owner. So I actually encourage it. And I'm a fairly new clinic, so I haven't had a big long history or experience with it. But the way that we've done it is that at the start of them working with me, they were just sort of they were trying to develop it and just get a handle of it. So they were using the clinic to do that, and they were posting clinic stuff. And then what I've suggested to them is that their professional or personal professional page needs to be a more niche market than just physio. There's just so much out there that if they're going to do it well, they need to identify who their market is. And so I think my guys have taken that year to do a lot of clinic-based stuff, and they've started to identify who they want to talk to specifically. And while clinically they would obviously be in the clinic if they had a problem, in terms of value, then they can be the regarded expert in their area, which is it's not the clinic bread and butter. So they've got this little area that's connected, but it's just outside the clinic market, I guess, if that makes sense.
So you're making those distinctions clear to eliminate the conflict in the first place. You're saying, well, this is where our brand aligns. Indirectly, you're saying you can do this as long as it's got a different target market and a different niche and a different subject matter. I mean, that does make things pretty clear. But what if it's not? What if someone's got similar interests? If you're like an EP and you love strength conditioning and rehabilitation, and then that's what you're posting on your own private page is different ways of rehabilitating. I mean, is there in your eyes a conflict of interest then if those brands are not clearly defined?
Yeah, look, there certainly could be. And I think that just being really upfront and talk about it regularly is probably the best way to negotiate that. I think that concept of a win-win is the thing that we talk about a lot. It's we think about young practitioners building a following and getting being discoverable. I think that's inevitable. I don't think there is a future where that won't happen. So that if we can do it that well, that they identify their success and the clinic success as the same thing, then maybe a bit naively, I think we probably hopefully avoid situations like that. But obviously, if it came to it, yes, there could be a bit of a conflict as to whose is whose and things like that. The other way we've gone about it is just to try and produce so much all the time that there's such a back catalogue that it probably it's if they were to leave, there's just so much there that how do they take it? It's just
and could they take it? Would you let them?
So we've got a system where things that go on our social media pages get put in a central, Google Drive. So anything that's big content like instructional videos or things like that, then it lives in our drive and it's part of our intellectual property. So anything that they've done more towards their own niche stuff is direct to their platforms. Like the amount that they're able to just Gary Vaynerchuk says document rather than create. They're just documenting their life. So there's so much that by the time you look at what they might take, they've already made another 10 videos. So yeah. I guess if we're really good at it and they can leverage what I've done and how I've done it to get better themselves. Point A is I think hopefully they recognize that I can help them with it. So they think that they're better with me than without me. And then point two is if we do just so much of it and get really good at it, then there's enough anyway. So it probably doesn't matter if we lose this bit to them in the future or not.
Yeah. And I think that's it. When you're really secure in your business and your role as a business owner and as a leader, you know where your value lies, you know what you're teaching them. And our goal from day one is to nurture them, provide them with CPD, watch them grow, and to invest in everything. You know, we take the plan and we nurture it and we water it, and we actually are really proud at the end. And, you know, in my experience, I've helped quite a lot of business owners set up their clinics. But I think, you know, there's always a few that doesn't go that way. And I think the last thing we want to do as business owners is literally, you know, lay all the seeds, plant it all and watch it grow for them, and then you just let them walk away. So, you know, I think we all agree on that win-win. But I think the reason why I'm discussing it now is this is going to get, and worse is not the wrong word, it's going to take momentum. This is going to pick up, and it's going to take on as quickly as COVID-19 has hit us, I think. I think this social media trend now is in full flight, and there are some businesses that if they're not having these conversations about expectations of content and where that content lies and IP, and I know, Paul, I've got you up next. We talk about this stuff a lot, and I think we've been talking about this for a couple of years now. And that's, you know, intellectual property and what is owned by the business and what is not. And I know that there's a huge amount of legality surrounding this, and I'm not going to dump all this on you either. And often what is law and what we all follow through on are two totally different things. But as allied health professionals, I can't help but think that we sometimes think we're just exempt. We love creating grey areas. We do it in the employment versus contractor model. We're like, oh, it's a grey area. We'll just kind of stick our head in the sand and do what we want. Why do we think that laws don't apply to us? Because when you look at other industries, it's very clear. It's very clear in legal that there is a restraint period. You don't take your clients. It's very clear when you're an accountant in a time like this that you don't set up a private Instagram page and give out free financial advice on JobKeeper. You do it for your company, you do it for your business. And yet in allied health, we love to blur the lines. Paul, I love your thoughts on this. We were chatting about your brother. Hit us with it. Tell me what you think.
Yeah, so thanks. Look, this came across our desk a year ago now. And at the time, I must admit, I was really flabbergasted was probably the word. And with no necessary factual reason why, I was just it had never really come up before. I didn't grow up going through uni with social media, and this was just not on our radar at all. And I'm guessing that's probably going to be the case with a lot of clinic owners, that the first time it might come up is necessarily going to be a bit of a surprise to them, unfortunately. It definitely was for us. So at the time, I was a bit unsure what to do and how to deal with it, and also what to think about it. So I went and asked some people in other industries. I had a chat to my brother, who's an engineer. I had a chat to a friend of mine who's a senior executive in a fashion label, and had a chat to a couple of mates who are graphic designers, architects, and drafting industries. And the message that coming from those sort of other corporate entities was that it was just not done. That it just wasn't existing. It just didn't happen in those industries. Some of them even said, no, there's no way someone would do that. Set up their own personal social media page when they're working for this business. Because if they're a full-time employee of this business, then they just wouldn't do that. But no one really had any kind of reason as to why they wouldn't do it. It just wasn't done. So it definitely came across to me, and that's only a very small sample of people that I spoke to, but it came across to me that it was an oddity within our profession or our industry, that it wasn't mainstream, it wasn't quite the norm. And maybe now, a year later, it is more normal, and certainly seems to be more normal when you look at social media and the number of accounts out there, and the number of people who've got personal accounts or personal professional accounts. So it definitely is becoming, as you and I have spoken about, is becoming more and more commonplace. So we went and contacted our lawyers, of which there are contract lawyers and IP lawyers, and we kind of said to them, what do we do here? How do we deal with this? And I can share with you that information that we got, granted it was a year ago, was that certainly people are entitled to have their own personal and professional social media pages or profiles, even when they're working for you. That you can limit legally, you're entitled to limit the access they have to the patients on your clinic or your business's database. And you can limit legally, within reason, the access patients have to their social media, personal, professional pages. There was guidelines and there was suggestions, and I know Osteopathy Australia has suggestions already in terms of social media, but there was definitely some laws there that were protecting the business's intellectual property whilst respecting the option or the availability of the practitioner to sort of have their own personal professional page as well. So when we came back to it, we created some policies, we put things into our contracts, we sat down with our staff and we went through it, and we had that conversation about what's reasonable, what are the boundaries here, where can we utilize their skills and their knowledge to help the business. And we came up with some terms of acceptance and had policies and, as I say, clauses in our contracts made up from that. On reflection now, now that you and I have spoken about it a few times and there's some other people involved in those conversations, I think when I looked at the other industries, what it was they'd just already gone through that process. They'd already had their contracts written up. They'd already had really strict IP clauses in there. And therefore the culture in those businesses or industries had already been set some time ago, because the systems, the policies, the procedures, you know, the bricks and mortar was kind of already set, and their culture was just driven from that. So that would be my experience. My advice would be certainly have conversations, certainly make sure that whatever the terms of agreement are, that's put in writing and that it's very, very clear, very transparent, so there can be a win-win, so there can be a utilization of skills, passions in those areas, without anybody kind of getting confused as to where the boundaries lie.
Helps, because I think there's obviously the legal and the ethical part of this, and at the end of the day, no matter which side you fall, it's about the precedents that you set. And as you just said, no matter what it is that you're going to do, whether it's that legal part or whether it's coming up with a negotiated agreement just between the two of you, whatever you set in place now, other people watch. And we are followers by nature. So if you let one employee start up their own business brand and that takes momentum and gets going, people will watch. And we are creatures of herd mentality. And you'll go, well, oh, they're doing that, maybe I'll do that too. So my suggestion is, in having these conversations and these open conversations, is no matter what side of the fence you fall, whether it's legal or whether it's nurturing or whether it's being open-ended, I think it's important that you get clarity around what it is that you want as a business owner, what you want for your culture and what you want for your team before you deliver that. Because once it's in place, when we talk about momentum that is already here, it's just going to keep going. And can you backpedal on that? Yes, you probably can, but it makes your life a ton harder, I would think. Mick, I'm kind of over to you now, because I've jumped straight from legal to somebody who doesn't usually care too much about legal. And I say that very respectfully. You know, often you make a lot of decisions that's right for your business. You know your business best and you know your team best. Where do you sit with this?
I'm really frustrated and angry that we're using words like protect, control, outright, discourage self-promotion outside of our business. I prefer to help, build and enhance. They're the words I'd be looking to use. I think you're 100% correct. We need to have these chats early and have the really clear expectations that this is what our business needs, and that's absolutely and always the priority. But outside of that, I absolutely want to build trust with you, and trust is going to take a while, and trust will come when you have a project that you're working on, and I would love to help you with that. But let's talk about it. What are your goals with that? I wonder if I've got any connections or some knowledge that might help you. And I think if we do that, they'll come back threefold and they'll be like, well, I want to help the business even more now. And that's only been our experience. And much like Dave said, we're still pretty young, and this all might blow up in our face in a couple of years. But I've only seen my practitioners create 4 or 5 brands that are bigger than iMove right now, and they're actually generating us patients. They've probably helped us get through Corona because they're attracting their own patients through their own brands, which I love. But I think we have to do both. The quote I have here is the Richard Branson quote: is train people well enough so they can leave, but treat them well enough that they'll want to stay. I think there's a lot of learnings that comes from building your personal brand as well. And I love young clinicians who are going through those learnings, because they also see how hard it is. And they learn a lot about the business. And I think it garners a mutual respect watching them do that. There's some early thoughts I have. I've got 2 pages of notes here if you want to guide me with those questions or ask anything else.
Yeah. Well, ownership of the content. I mean, I think it's not a matter of, holding people back, but when you are paying people to do content and in your time for the benefit of your business, then that's all well and good. And I'm sure that you've agreed and you've stated that you'll allow people to share it. But moving forward, who does own the content? The person that put it together or the business? Where do you sit with that?
I think it's really clear that we own the content. We got advice on that a good 18 months ago, just with the videos on our blog. It has an iMove logo on it, and we own it. And it's been produced on our time. But I think that's a separate conversation. I think that's really clear, actually, that if the content's been produced for the business owns it. I would be surprised if a team member said, I want to use that content, but I would happily let them use it. I don't see a problem with them using it.
As long as it's branded?
No, I really don't mind. I think I'm in agreement with Dave there. There's just so much content. Like it's really going to come down to how you position yourself and how the business position themselves. Like the 10 of us here could do a single leg bridge and put it on Instagram. That's not going to dictate the outcome. So yeah, I'm super biased. The other thing there is, try and stop a patient seeing a practitioner that's left your clinic. I mean, they're going to get a worse outcome. You just can't do anything about it. And this generation will absolutely build their personal brand. And you have no option. Help them and enhance it. I think stopping them is going to decrease your retention. I think we've got to try and have those open conversations with them.
Yeah. And what about content that is produced in their own time? I mean, are they at the moment, do you not have to worry about that because they are very much producing for iMoveU? Do you have any that have, it's about that balance. I mean, at the moment, you're kind of sitting quite content because you've got the balance. My question to you is, what if the balance shifted and somebody's attention shifted and they did start spending more time? I mean, it hasn't happened yet, but these conversations about what you do when it does happen. What happens when somebody's attention shifts more directly towards their business? Do you then have an issue with it?
No, because I've got credits in the bank. I have literally gone out of my way and spent my own money promoting their own personal content. And in return, it has made those conversations easier. And the whole time it's been well, I'm going to build this brand that's running. And if I get patients from it, I want them to come and see me at iMove. So it's from having exactly what you're saying, is having the clear expectations at the start and really setting that up well at the start. It'll just foster this trust and credits in the bank. But that we haven't stopped that from going sour. I opened up a satellite clinic, built a guy's personal brand. He left to another clinic up the road. He took his patients with him, but I wasn't going to stop that. And if I didn't have that mentality for all my team members, I would be taking something away from all the good ones, and he still would have left. I think we can enhance the really good ones, and I don't think we can stop the bad ones from leaving.
Yeah. I think most people kind of know that now, I guess, with their experience in business. Any other golden nuggets you've got in there in your 2 pages of notes that you want to deliver?
I don't see this as an issue. I think the content they produce on our time is our content. That is very clear by the law. And we have a choice to be open and growth mindset and really help them build themselves up as long as their priority is the business. And if they build themselves up so big and they're going to leave or they want to leave, that's fucking awesome. I think that's so good. I feel privileged to be a part of that. I might lose a practitioner here and there. I'm really interested in, Lisa, those accounts that have those, your team members that have those really big brands, are they promoting your business on their personal accounts? Because that's the expectation we have, Jade. I should clear that up, is the guys that have built their bigger brands, they're actually promoting us and getting us busier. But that's because of that early trust.
So our guys, so one of the brands I really don't want to be affiliated with, not because it's not a great branding, but it's Get Naked Australia. So I'm sure you've all seen that across Instagram, where people are taking naked photos of their butts in different places, like natural places around Australia. Now, when that brand was started with Brendan, I'll give out a shout to Brendan Jones, when he was a physio with us. So he was always a physio with us, and we chatted it back and forth, because obviously it went on to go on to like the Sunrise program, and it got quite a bit of media behind it. And he spoke to the APA, because obviously there is that idea that could be a little bit creepy depending on what type of person, how you thought about it. So we've kept, Brendan keeps that very separate. There's no cross mingling, but it is all about body positivity. So I just don't think there's any reason for that to mesh. There's no cross there, but other than body positivity and being proud of what you are. The other osteo, she's a professional sports player. So she's only new to the team, and there hasn't really been any crossover as yet. We haven't really touched base with her, because I didn't even realize her Insta was so big until I just had a look at it yesterday. I think that's probably a discussion we're going to have. But in saying that, she's only 6-7 weeks into her career. So it's not really like, she's got big followings interstate. It's not really local to us. So I don't think it's very relevant at the moment, other than, I guess, promoting the brand of osteopathy, not so much the brand of Georgia being one of our practitioners at Bounce Back. So yeah, I guess unlike your team's very it's very relational to what you're doing in the clinic. Ours kind of isn't at the moment. Hers is coming from a professional sports background. So yeah.
And I think that's the thing that we're seeing commonly, is that culture is really important. And I think you see that in any organization: culture, respect, all those sorts of really strong virtues coming through. But at the end of the day, if somebody can justify it to themselves, they're not wrong. And if somebody's going to burn you, they're going to burn you. If somebody's ethics or confirmatory bias will justify what their behavior is, they will go ahead and do it, and they will not give it a second thought. And I think, you're naive as a business owner to not assume often, plan for the worst and, hope for the best type mentality. Anything else did you have to add, Mick? So I'll move over to you, Steve. You're in a bit of a different space. You've got your finger in a lot of pies, a lot of good pies. But some of them, obviously, you've got IP with, your professional, I guess, the hands-on face-to-face contact with patients, but you've also very invested in technology, software, and tangible products. And I think the reason where it's very, very clear when you've got a product, who owns that product. But when you've got something that's not tangible, like intellectual property, the distinction and the grey area is where it starts to originate. So I know it's very easy to say that, if you had somebody employed under your system and they were creating their own software and tech, you'd say to them, no way, much like an engineering firm or an accounting firm. Where do you sit with it, given that you've obviously got both sides of it, and some of your employees would cross over, I would assume?
Yeah, look, we definitely do. I definitely sit much closer to Mick's side of the fence than Paul's. I think if Paul's not going to offer you a job, probably come down the road and I'll offer you one, because I think I think I agree with Mick. Collaboration is the key, and I think I really loved hearing Stephen as an osteopathic student talk about bringing something to the table. And I think, look, in this generation, we do tend to see a lot of, entitled people sort of come out, and, you had the generations grown up with the participation trophies and everyone gets an award. It's really awesome to see people looking to come together and drive the same brand. I think for me, that's probably where it sits. If you're looking to go and create your own personal profile for you, look, that's okay, but it's probably not for our business. If you're looking to create your own personal profile, but to grow, for me, the profession, I think that's definitely where I sit. And look, I'm a pretty good example of this. I worked for a company coming out of university probably 10 years ago now, and I saw the value in social media. And it was, look, really in the golden stage where you could do a post and you'd see 50,000 people would see it. And I was going out of my way to create content for the company that I was working for. And it was looked down upon. I was happy to share it. I was doing stuff outside of my time to create content for the company. And their impression back then was if you weren't seeing 100 patients a week, I was already working 55 hours a week seeing patients. I wasn't a physio. Like, content wasn't physio. Whereas for me, I've seen the value in what it can do. Like, it's allowed us to go to over 30 countries around the world teaching what we do. And, I think, I've definitely seen the value on that. I'd love to have our team, really out there driving, creating content. Look, the thing that we really struggled as a business from a clinic point of view is actually, we've blocked out the time, we've set the KPIs, but if you don't have the team members who actually like to create the content, it's actually quite challenging. So that's probably been my biggest frustration with this, is looking for those type of team members like Stephen, who sounds like he's going to be a fantastic grade coming out, and a mixed team who really love and thrive behind it. So I think, I've collaborated with most people on this webinar. We've all got the same, ambitions. We're doing this tonight to drive the profession forward. And I think the more people who can grow their brands, pushing the same message to grow this forward, it's going to be a better profession. There's going to be a bigger pie for all of us too.
And I think what we're hearing though is some of the clinics that do have a real online presence and social media presence already are probably the ones embracing that content. The more people you've got creating content, the more content you're going to have. But when you are a face-to-face clinic that really reins in on those personal one-on-one relationships, and your database is very, very valued based upon the patients coming through your door, and you don't have a social media presence, then I think that IP and that contract to support your database protection is really, really important. So it actually comes down to where the value in your business lies. Is it in your database, or is it in your online presence? Where are you generating your money from? Where are you generating your presence from, and what direction do you want to take? If you are somebody, like I Move You, or with some of your courses and stuff, Steve, the online presence for you guys actually generates more patients and more clients and customers elsewhere. Whereas there are some very much bricks and mortar clinics out there that do need to protect their database still from that old school, don't go down and open up around the corner. So I think where most people's perspectives will align with, will refer back to what that business model actually is and what the direction of your business is, which is why these conversations are really important. But I guess yours would sit more with that content growth mindset rather than individual patient. I mean, the bulk of your business is really online. Would you say though, Steve?
Look, we've got numerous arms to our business. We've got a face-to-face practice like everyone else on the call as well. And, from that point of view, I only see, this continuing to grow and continuing to be more important. And I think there's lots of things you can do and lots of technology you can leverage in your business to allow you to use the skills that you've got within the team to grow your practice as well. And also, there's still opportunities with this technology for everyone to have a brand and everyone to play their part in the clinic, but also to keep the branding around the actual clinic itself rather than the actual practitioner. So I think it's about the way that you choose to leverage, I guess, the IP that you've got. And I guess we're going to see in 5-10 years time which is the way to go. Is it going to be that more traditional model, or is it going to be maybe some of these more boutique and progressive clinics that are going to continue to thrive? And I think I know where I'm putting which basket I'm putting my eggs in.
Yeah. And I think it's about intent and where you put your time. I think if you make it even, you're putting it towards the business and to yourself as a personal brand, that becomes very, very clear. If somebody is focused on themselves, then again, that becomes equally clear. Thanks, Steve. So thanks everybody for your patience as well. I know it's going a little bit longer than I thought, but I think there's some pretty valuable contributions coming out of this. So Luke Nelson, I think you for a while kind of worked independently in your own business, and over the time you've built that personal brand. I think why your perspective is really important is because we did have a conversation at one point about, you know, a change in direction with your career, and you are very present. You do have a social influence. You've solidified your place in sports chiropractic, also with Sports Medicine Australia, and also, you know, in your individual platform with running and education. If you did go to an employer, how would you feel about, I guess, your voice being muzzled a little bit and having it directed towards a business? Would it deter you from going to work somewhere, or would you say that you would bring a lot of value and somebody would hire you for the reasons and the value that you bring personally?
Yeah, look, I'd like to think it was the latter. As you know, I was in discussions at the start of this year with a physio clinic nearby. It was actually one of the questions that we did have a discussion on this actually, and I didn't tell you that. Can you hear me okay? Or yeah. We had a discussion on this, and he was actually very encouraging. This clinic hadn't done a lot on social media, we had some discussions in terms of, you know, possibilities and some of the ideas that I had in terms of creating content in a multidisciplinary practice, and they saw a lot of merit in that. What we didn't have a discussion though is we didn't have a discussion on what would happen on any content that I'd previously created, or whether my personal one would continue. This didn't go. We didn't end up. It was mutually decided not to pursue this option. It's just really interesting hearing others' experiences on the call tonight. I think that there's. I agree. If you know, I was looking to hire someone, that would be something I would look favourably upon, in that they did have a local following, something to offer, and being proactive. I think it's a sign of I guess creating and doing this sort of thing, is that they're being proactive, and that's something that I like to see, that they've got initiative to get out and do that, and they've got aspirations as well too. So yeah, it's interesting hearing others points of view on it tonight as well. But if I felt that that, you know, if I was to be hired, and the content I'm creating would only be for the business, I don't think I'd mind that. If it was the job that I really wanted to do, then that's just part and parcel of doing it. I think if I was told to stop doing it, that might be a bit more challenging. I mean, it's something I have enjoyed, but again, if it's a job that I would really want, then, you know, I'd consider that. But my ideal outcome would be to be able to create that, and also be employed there at the same time.
Yeah, and I guess, so what are you kind of seeing? Is this happening in the chiropractic space as well? I know that there's a lot of people creating a lot of influence on social media across everywhere, but where does the chiropractic space sit?
Well, most of my friends and colleagues that have associates and employees, they are encouraged to build their own profile as well. I'm not aware. None of my friends have discouraged those that are working. I'm sure it happens, but none of my friends and colleagues have done that. It's something that they see as a benefit, basically to extend the network of the clinic. And I totally agree in that it shouldn't be 100% self-serving. It should be to build up that practice. I mean, essentially, that's what mine is to get patients into a brick and mortar practice, which, you know, would, if I was employed, that would help the employer. So it's becoming, and I'm seeing it happen now. A lot of the new grads are now starting up profiles, and putting out a lot more content. So it is becoming a lot more common now. And I think people are sort of encouraging it, as I have been with the associate that's worked with me for the last 6 to 12 months. I've encouraged, she's got her own profile as well, and I've encouraged her to create content too.
And I think it's about where your skill sets lie. I know that there's some business owners out there that are great business owners, but they're terrible at social media. So, maybe it might be good to get somebody else doing that social media for them. I know I lean on my team considerably to be creating this content. And just because they're brilliant online doesn't mean that they're going to be great to build up the foundations of their own business and open up around the corner as well. Just because you've got 100,000 followers doesn't mean you know how to run a P&L and navigate a team. So, and that's not to take away from the students here, because I'm sure that you guys will have amazing businesses one day. But I think that's the thing. It's where the skill set lies and what it actually means. So, but yeah, thanks, Luke.
Yeah, thank you, Jane.
I've missed. Why have I missed you, Michael? Must have gone past you. Michael, can I just come back to you for a second? Because we had a bit of a chat yesterday, and you gave me a great perspective on, and when I say Michael, I mean Michael OJ, on the football clubs and some value in skills at the footy clubs. Can you extend on that for everyone?
Sure. I guess I'm echoing a lot of what everyone says, in terms of, having a win-win and whatnot. But I look at it as, I'm more of a soccer person, so I'll give you a soccer analogy, as, businesses being a team, right? And, everyone knows who Barcelona is, Manchester United is, Liverpool is. Yes, you have amazing players playing for them. And, they're fantastic. They bring so much social, they bring, such a spillover, and that's amazing. They might go to the rival club, sure. Do you lose out on an amazing player? Yeah, you do. Do you lose out on, money that player brings in? Sure. But you hope that as a business, as a club, you're bigger than a player. You'd want to build that player. You put so much into training, into building, that you want them to succeed. And it's like Michael said before, if they're going to go, they're going to go. So you'd hope that the business is strong enough that you can have a successful relationship with your employees. And I guess that comes from the transparency where we're all talking about, having that win-win. If we're on the same side and the culture's great, and this is a completely different tangent, but yeah, I guess if everyone's on the same side, then it's a win-win for everyone. I
think that's the thing. Everyone's on the same side until they're not. And whilst there's some pretty successful businesses on this call, there's also some really small businesses out there that need to be protected by the conversations that we're having here. And I think we need to be cautious of just saying, hey, everybody, embrace social media and all the rest of it. Because if you're a new business and you've been running for a couple of years, and you're just creating this database for yourself, and you get a new graduate in who starts to target and market their personal social media towards this small business, it does make it very easy for somebody to just go and open up around the corner. So when you do have a big presence, and when you do have a great culture, and when you do have a good existing brand, it's quite easy to have that growth mindset and embrace. And it's not about competition and yours and mine. It's about working really, really hard and being able to protect what's yours. This notion that everybody comes and can just leave and walk around the corner. If you are a small business owner, surely you are allowed to protect your database a little bit in those beginnings. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I know that there's probably going to be some small businesses out there who, and for no fault of their own, are not in a position where they can be so encompassing and so embracing when they are in a small country town, and there's a really small population in the town, and somebody works with them, and you've got a social media presence, and somebody build themselves up within the community, and you've worked really hard. Is it harder in country towns? Is it harder in rural towns when you do have to deal with more competition, when social media isn't that front of mind, but it is a way of connecting other people? does anyone want to comment on the beginning stages, or I mean, is it just really, is it no different?
But isn't that, I guess, a legal side of things? Shouldn't we? I'm not a business owner, but I guess, shouldn't business owners be looking at how can we, control risks? But then it's also a grim world to live in just, everyone's going to leave me. I guess if you've got a solid legal backing, then you need to be going full steam ahead, is what I think, I guess.
Yeah, look, I totally agree, but I think in some of those small country towns, the competition is more rife, and whether you like it or not, you do need to protect your business model and what you've worked for probably a little bit more. And I guess whilst you can appreciate that somebody might leave, you also don't have to help them do it and clear the path and open the door for them as they wave you goodbye. So I guess it just depends on the situation and how much you need to protect. And yeah, you're right. I guess it goes back to Paul's point in business owners do have a right to protect their IP. And, you've also got a right to embrace your staff and all those sorts of things. But I think that, in osteo, a lot of the time we don't do that enough. We don't look to protect ourselves because maybe it's frowned upon because you don't have that growth mindset. I don't think it's even about that. I mean, Paul, why do you, obviously you really want to protect your business. You've worked really, really hard for it.
There we go. Clicking the right buttons here. I think, yeah, and just to clarify earlier, we still have team members who have very large social media personal accounts. We have every level of this, I guess, in our experience. We have some that work for us as employees, doing a lot of contribution to our business social media accounts. We have some that have their own stay tuned social media accounts, and they build their own personal profile through their own branches of our business social media accounts, and then some that have their own personal ones as well. And Mick was spot on that you do have to embrace it to a point, because as you say, no matter what they're going to do legally anyway, no matter what's written on the bit of paper, they're going to do what drives them. And if you can embrace what drives them and make it on the same as what drives you, fantastic. It's a really, really difficult one from a legal standpoint. Michael mentioned you can go full steam ahead, but you never want to be reactive in these situations. It's never good, no matter what, after the fact. That's the only sort of thing that I think is really clear, is to have these conversations early on to establish what is agreed, what is reasonable, what is going to work towards the win-win early on. Because in my experience, the most common problems occur purely out of miscommunication or misinterpretation of expectations.
That's right. And I think for myself, it's not the legal ramifications when this sort of thing happens. I wear my heart on my sleeve. I try and give my team everything. You don't want to get your heart broken. So putting some little deterrents in there to protect your heart is really important. And, I certainly don't put deterrents in there to protect my business. I try and protect who I am, because every single time you get hurt, you get dents appear, and resilience is really important. But I'd still try and prevent things like that if I could. But you learn over the years, and, hopefully it stops happening, less and less. But I think now finally we can come to you, Nick. Anthony. Hit us with some bombs. What are you getting at an association level? Are people calling about this? Are people nervous about this? Are they embracing it? I think this social media presence, particularly with osteopathy being a really small brand, this has got to be a silver lining for osteo, doesn't it? We're seeing osteos pop up everywhere. It's great for publication.
Well, I suppose I'm slightly biased in the fact that I think the more osteo that's promoted, the better it is. But I also understand the complexity. We don't get a lot of calls about this, interestingly. We get lots of calls about social media and you're meeting the obligations of the advertising guidelines endlessly. But rarely this battle between IP and whatnot. And I think, as Paul pointed out, if you've got good advice, you've got good contracts, you've got proper social media policies, you actually implement and train your staff about those policies, then you've probably got good legal standing. If you haven't done any of that, then you might as well let all the staff do whatever they like, because you've got no recourse. So, so businesses that have invested in the business and setting up those frameworks only have themselves to blame. And that includes small businesses, because when you look at the Fair Work rulings around commentary or social media in or out of both in work and outside of work, but outside of work, there are as many cases that have found in favour of the employee for commentary in social media as there are that have found in favour of the employer. And that's mainly because in lots of places where they don't have clear contracts, they don't have a clear social media policy, they don't have clear IP clauses, they haven't actually sat down and trained their staff, and the whole team understands the boundaries, then you're probably not going to be able to police it. So it is a bit about that, setting up the structure to do what is good for the business, but also good for the team. And I think anything that is promoting the business, and I think it is very clear, if it's on staff time, if it's using staff resources, the IP is owned by the business. If it's in their own personal time, they're not mentioning your business, not tagging it, not referencing it, not saying where they work or anything, much more grey. If they're going to say really negative things about your business, less grey. But if they're just promoting, say, osteopathy or wellness, it starts to get really difficult unless you have all that documentation in place. But I think, again, it's around that building that understanding between both business owners and those who are working in the team, so it benefits both. It's fine. So, but I think, yeah, it's a lot of work for businesses if they want to make those rock solid guarantees on what people can and cannot do.
Yeah, and in an effort to be proactive rather than reactive, it would be an association standpoint to try and at least update a social media policy to make these guidelines clearer so that everybody's on the same page. Because I think that, you know, this is going to be front of mind for many, and the last thing you want to do is see something evolve before your eyes and a moving train take off and you're not on it.
Yeah. And certainly, you know, in our HR service, the resources, the 300 plus resources that are in there are templates, because exactly as several people have pointed out, in every other industry, this is the norm. Those templates are the same. Yes, how you may want to tweak them for your business may be very different, but a standard social media policy is pretty standard across nearly all industries. I think the difference in osteo, chiro, physio, health in general is it's interesting social content. I don't think there's probably an accountant who has 1 million followers, but there are plenty of health providers who do. And probably the last one that did may have been running a large accounting association that ended rather badly. So I think, you know, it is that good content, but it's that discussion around how that fills out. But also in an industry where lots of people work in multiple clinics or have their own business plus work in other people's businesses, well, where's the line? What if they already had an existing account with millions of followers? I'm not sure that restraints of trade clauses or IP clauses around that content is going to stand. What they do within your hours and business probably is.
Yeah. And I think it comes down to just, you know, one thing that we do best is that personal contact and communication. And when you open up the lines of communication and you're honest and you're transparent and you show a little bit of vulnerability about risk and reward, you can kind of see somebody's true colors come through. And when it comes to time and value and building a business brand, it should be mutual. There should be a mutual agreement, a mutual win-win, as we've said it before. The business brand should be lifted to its highest potential if that is the one that's generating the money and paying you. But at the same time, a business can still be supportive of a practitioner, of a personal brand, as long as it is not in conflict, as long as it's aligned, and as long as the communication is there. But put some policies into a document, get some legal advice so that you don't literally throw your hands up in the air and say, oopsie, and try and navigate around something after it's happened. So my apologies for this running really, really late. Thank you for your attention and your focus. I think it's a great conversation to have. I know that iMove boys welcomed me into their webinar on the weekend. Thank you very much for that. And I did post this in your group anonymously, Nick. So you've all kind of come into play over the last few days, and I think that this is something that is going to continue to evolve, and hopefully we can keep the conversation open and share this post. Maybe some people will get halfway through it, some people will end off later, but I think it's one of those things that's documented now, and your opinions are really, really valuable no matter where you stand. I think they're all valued. So thank you very, very much. I'll put it all together and I'll get you the link and we can share it out there. Thank you.